Okay, hello everyone. My name is Ruth,
And I'm Jeff.
and today we're gonna be talking about how interest rates affects you.
Yeah, so welcome to JNR Viewpoint. We're going to be talking about these things and the economy and what you can do in your personal lives to find a better way to make things work. So what's been going on in the news lately is that the Federal Reserve has just increased interest rates 75 basis points again for the third time in a row, just this year in 2022. So it's been a big year of raising interest rates.
Definitely. And sometimes we see these hikes in interest rates and we do not understand how does this affect me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like they talk about it in the news all the time, but it's like, what does that have to do with me, my job, my family? And the reality is that it actually has a lot to do with our families and with our jobs and things like that. So we're going to go over that in this video today.
Yes. So let's start with who raises interest rates? Well, the Federal Reserve, who is the central bank of the United States, is the institution that uses interest rates as an instrument to, stimulate the economy or maybe cause the economy to slow down a little bit. So right now, what they've been doing is like they raise interest rates to give a signal to the different banks, like to your local bank, like Wells Fargo or Bank of America, etc., so that they can raise interest rates as well. And when they rise interest rates, well, that affects people because now money is more expensive, which means that, well, if you want to borrow money to buy that new car, it's going to cost you more. And in that case, well, some people might not be able to borrow this money.
Yeah, and this is a direct response to the inflation that we've been having for the past year. See, like when COVID happened, right? The idea was like we shut down the economy because we wanted to keep everyone safe, or at least, that's what the government decided to do. And so because of that, they also lowered interest rates. With the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates, and it also printed a ton of money so that the federal government can just send out tons of stimulus checks, right? You remember all those stimulus checks that we all got in 2020 and 2021? Well, the thing is that they came with a cost, and that created inflation. See, what creates inflation is when prices of things raise higher than your job wage or your job salary. So because of that, what was going on is they just threw out money into the economy. Then we had way too much money in the economy, but not as many products and services because, well, we were not working as much. Everyone was staying home. Mm-hmm. And so because of all this inflation, and inflation takes a little time. There's some lag time. And inflation started really heating up, especially in 2021, 2022. And now the Federal Reserve, has been realizing these past few months that this is a real problem. Like we need to, inflation is getting out of control. We need to start getting things back under control. And so they raised interest rates to, like what Ruth said, to make money more expensive. So here's the reality, is like when you take out a loan, you usually have to pay an interest rate, right? Sometimes, when the interest rate is lower, obviously your debt is cheaper to pay off, it's easier to pay off, and then when the interest rate is higher, it's more expensive to pay off. Well, during COVID, they had interest rates so low, the Federal Reserve's actual interest rate was 0, and the banks were giving out mortgage loans for like 2-3%, and that just made people want to spend. It was so easy to take out loans, to take out debt, to buy a house, and that's why just everything shot up in price.
In some cases, we even had free money. Like we had stimulus checks, people that just decided to stop working and they started getting unemployment checks. Even there were people that were getting unemployment checks by mistake. So these were people that were spending money that they shouldn't have received in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And so they say, some people say that the most expensive kind of money is free money. And the reason why is because you don't realize it at first. When you get free money printed out to you, sent out to you in the form of stimulus checks, well, you don't feel the pain of it at first, but later on, everything becomes more expensive. Inflation happens in the whole economy, and that's what we've been experiencing these last 2 years. And so that's why obviously people have been upset. They've seen the gas prices go up, they've seen their food prices go up, they've seen, of course, the housing market go crazy, and so the and the people who suffer the most. I mean, everyone suffers during inflation, right? The people who suffer the most, though, are those who are lower income, because those who are lower income are already just getting by with the bare minimum. Well, when their basic things of milk and bread are now up in price, it's really hard even to survive, right? So inflation hurts everyone, especially the lower class. So the Federal Reserve, it has two main missions. They like to keep inflation down so that they're not screwing over the whole economy and screwing over everybody. And the other mission that the Federal Reserve has is to make sure that there is sufficient employment rate, that our unemployment rate is at a healthy level, we may say, like as low as possible, but to still keep the economy pretty healthy. And so, well, I guess they went too far, I guess, is what their COVID response went too far. And now they're going very far to kind of walk back those steps with the interest rate hikes.
Exactly. And now that interest rates are a lot higher than they were before, where you have a lot of people that they were living on debt already, people that, if you are borrowing money to be, people that are living paycheck to paycheck, and they are some people that are even borrowing money to be able to cover their normal expenses. Well, now that borrowing money is even more expensive because credit cards, interest rates went up as a result of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, where now these people are suffering because they don't have enough disposable income to be able to cover the expenses that they were used to. So they are cutting back on expenses, and we were able to see this in the past report that we saw when they released the CPI data. We saw that the people are spending less money in clothing and in items that are not basics or necessary, but people are spending even more money on groceries and at the pump and things like that. So we can see how people are suffering as a result of this. And also something very important to remember and to recognize is that now that people are having less disposable income, and the income that a family or a person has usually turns into the income of another person as well, where that means that where people are having we have less expending, but we also have less income in the population, and that causes a double punch to people.
Yeah, exactly. Because in our economy, we all need each other, right?
Yeah.
Every sector of the economy, every industry, we all just kind of feed off of each other. So when one industry suffers, many other industries suffer. You remember how in 2008, the housing market crashed, and it sent the whole economy down with it, because the reality is that every part of the economy feeds off of each other. So when we have now, now what they're basically doing is that they're increasing interest rates because this is a creditor's economy, right? Banks, people, like what Ruth was saying, we live a lot off of debt. A lot of people will use credit cards to make basic payments. And there's some pros and cons to that, but that basically leads we have these economic cycles, right? Where we have these times of prosperity, people are borrowing a lot of money, and then when times come to pay, oh crap, now the economy goes down. And so we're now going through that phase. We're starting to go through that phase where the economy's starting to go down. It's my prediction is it's going to go down quite a bit more before it starts to go back up again.
Yeah, I think it's gonna continue to going down as well, and I think we are not seeing. Right now we're still in a moment in which it's hard to see that we are starting to slow down in the economy. We see we saw that that the inflation went down a little bit in October compared to the previous month, and some people are very excited about those news. They think that the economy is recovering, that we're gonna be okay. You saw the stock market just rallying just like a few days ago as a result of that decision. But the reality is, inflation is not gonna go down very soon at all. I think it's gonna take probably another year or two before inflation goes down significantly, in my perspective. And I think the Federal Reserve is gonna keep obviously rising interest rates. So we're gonna see money getting even more expensive. We're gonna see people having a harder time being able to afford buying assets. because assets obviously, they have acquired a lot more value because of inflation. So I don't know. I mean, what would you recommend in this situation?
Well, I think when it's time to go ahead and just pay off all your debts, as soon as you can, and this is a good opportunity too, because there are still employers out there who are looking for workers, and if you're not very content with the work that you have right now, or if you feel like you're not getting paid adequately, I would recommend you go look for some jobs and see if you can get a pay raise. So try to get a pay raise and try to increase your skill set. Try to make yourself a more valuable person in the marketplace, whether you're a W-2 employee or whether you're an employer or a business owner, self-employed, doesn't matter. We all need to figure out a way to make ourselves
More
valuable in the economy, right? And those who, unfortunately, there's going to be people losing jobs, right? They've already been a lot of layoffs, especially in the tech industry lately, and there's probably going to be a lot more. As Jerome Powell said in the last few meetings, he's expecting to create some pain in the economy with these interest rate hikes, because what happens? How does that affect jobs anyway? The way it affects jobs, when the Federal Reserve increases interest rates, well, it's like what Ruth said. It sends a message so that all the banks who use the Federal Reserve, they borrow money. All of the normal banks like J.P. Morgan, Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, they all borrow money from the Federal Reserve, and they need to make a profit too. So when they borrow money from the Federal Reserve at a higher interest rate, now they need to, when they try to give a loan out to you or to a business, they're going to be giving out that loan with even a higher interest rate than the Federal Reserve. So they're giving out loans, what's the Federal Reserve rate right now? It's like around 3 or 4%, right? That's why mortgage loans, though, they're higher. They're like 6 or 7%. It's because those banks need to get a margin. They need to get some profit out of it, right? So all these banks, they're increasing interest rates on you, and the reality is that a lot of businesses and a lot of companies, they build their company off of debt. They use those interest rates. They use that money, those loans from those banks, to increase their business, to hire people. So when you get hired as an employee somewhere, think of it as you are, a lot of the times, you may not really know for sure, but a lot of the times you're actually getting employed off of a loan that the employer borrowed from the bank. And so if the interest rate from the bank is too high, well, then it's going to be very expensive for the employer to pay that loan back. So they're expecting you to be very productive and to really bring in a lot of revenue and business to their company in order for them to pay off their loans to the banks.
So if spending is going down in the economy because people don't have enough disposable income, and this business is getting higher interest rates as a business, and they're not making enough sales to compensate for that, where the obvious choice is going to be to probably reduce personnel. They would have to probably let go of some employees. They might have to slow down their investments in their business. They're not going to be motivated to grow or scale or try new things in their business. They're just going to try to be very conservative. Exactly. And obviously that's going to just keep spiraling.
Yeah, keep spiraling downward, because, and we've seen example of this with Facebook lately. With Mark Zuckerberg invested in Meta because when COVID happened, he was predicting that there was just a ton of people on social media during COVID, right? And he was predicting this was going to be a permanent thing. Everyone was going to stay on social media forever. But the reality is as COVID has kind of waned out, we got vaccinated, things have gotten better, then people started going back to work, living their normal lives again, and not being on social media as much. And the Facebook's investment in Meta, it was not going so well. So Mark Zuckerberg has just laid off a lot of employees, like thousands of employees from Facebook just recently because of this. And
that's just an example. This is happening like in small businesses, like probably in your local store in your neighborhood. We've personally seen like different businesses closing because they didn't have enough people coming in, enough sales. And going back to like the recommendations that we would give you, you mentioned how people should be working to raise their, to increase their income and to improve their skills. I would also add, like, if you're not doing it already, make sure that you're looking at your budget, that you're tracking that you're having a budget in the first place. And that you're tracking your expenses, that you're making sure, like, where is my money going, that where is your money going, that you know how much money you're making. Make sure that you know the basics, because sometimes we hear this over and over again, but we do not understand how important it is to know that. And yeah, it's just something else you would recommend.
Well, yeah, and I want to bounce off of what you just said. That's so important. I mean, we need to make sure we're living below our means. A lot of Americans don't even know how much money they make or how much money they really spend.
Yep.
So it's really important to know that. How much money are you really making? How much are you spending? And keep track of it. And you might be surprised at how much you're spending, for example. A lot of people out there actually do spend more than they make, and that's just not sustainable.
It's not.
And you want to make sure that you're living below your means, that you're making more than you're spending. And if you do have debt, try to pay that off as soon as possible, especially if you have a variable interest rate on anything, right? Like
exactly, in a credit card. If you have any credit card debt, make sure that you're paying that off as soon as you can. First.
So.
I would also say to invest in assets. If you do have the means, we know that sometimes that takes longer to some people to do that, but if you do have the means, if you have the money right now, invest in assets, because assets can hold value. Do not just waste your money on things that are gonna depreciate as soon as you buy it.
Yeah, and every asset, every asset does have a level of risk to it. You never know if, say, you invested in a real estate property, you don't know if the next day it's going to light up on fire and burn to the ground, right? I mean, you have mortgage, but you get my point. Like, you can buy up stocks. It could go good the next day or bad the next day. But the idea is you want to buy assets to store your money, because the idea is you want to help your money grow passively. You want to build your wealth. And cash, I mean, we still have 7.7% inflation. That means that if you were to just let your money sit in the bank, it's losing some value, every year.
I know, it's losing, I mean 7.7% per year, so that's almost 10%. That's very significant.
Yeah.
So
you want to make sure that you're getting more return than that. Now, there's some good opportunities, because the stock market's been crashing a lot. It's been going down this whole entire year of 2022. It's not been doing well at all this year. That means these stocks are cheap. They're relatively cheap than they were last year. So
this is a good moment to buy for the long term.
Yeah, it's a good moment to invest for the long term and wait for them to grow. Some of these stocks, they're going to lose. Some of them are going to grow. You just want to make sure that it's diversified enough that those that grow will outpace those that lost, so that you will come out with a pretty good profit at the end.
And something else that you really have to do is to smash the like button and follow us.
Yeah. We'll see you in the next video.
Yeah.